Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, 205 illegal Indian immigrants kicked out by a rampant President Trump land in Amritsar. Is this just the beginning? And with more interesting stuff from the Canadian Foreign Interference Inquiry, particularly recommendations moving forward. And in another reminder of why passion for Khalistan runs so deep within the Sikh community even today, we look back at the events of 39 years ago yesterday, when 4 young Sikh men were extrajudicially murdered by police. Just 4 of the tens of thousands that met the same fate that's ensured anti-Indian state feeling still runs so deep as the guilty still run free. And finally, we dip into the bear pit of Hindutva social media, where we find even the right-wing extremists may well be realising the breakup of India could be on the cards. Well, all this and more on today's show. But joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers. It is minus 20 degrees outside Celsius, but hey, your comments always warm the heart, so thanks for posting those. Keep the comments coming. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, and of course, invite all of your friends to join us on the show. And leave your comments as always. Thanks for joining us. Angus, back to you.
Absolutely. And James and I together, we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And yes, we will indeed, as usual, be taking a look at loads of great comments at the end of the show. So stay tuned for that. But let's get the show on the road. James, what are you going to start us off with this morning?
205 Indian nationals have touched down or will be touching down shortly back in Amritsar in India. Donald Trump is wasting no time in making sure that people feel the pinch of the ICE raids and all of that which it brings. Unfortunately, it seems that some people have been targeted and they are a little upset, as are some different organizations and businesses who are feeling the impact of the not only the deportations, but the fear of deportations when it comes to the illegal workers that are, of course, very prominent in the construction, in hospitality, and food services and such. But again, this is sending a clear signal that if you are in the U.S. illegally, it's time to pack your bags because Trump is sending you home. And this is a far cry from the 18,000 that Narendra Modi has agreed to repatriate, but it is definitely a step in the direction that the U.S. government wants to take with the new administration. It is also a far cry from the 220,000 illegal Indians that they expect or estimate are in the United States at this time. But again, the use of military aircraft, it is much more expensive than the traditional chartered aircraft in terms of returning people to their native homes or their native countries. But at the same time, it also helps to expedite the process. Part of the expedition of the process, or expediting of the process, is, of course, the due process of appeals is gone. The days of lengthy appeal processes and delays in being deported have gone out the window with this new administration. As I said, the C-17s are a very large aircraft, and they are seeming to be the de facto airplane for the deportation efforts out of the U.S. Of course, there are still some non-military flights that are taking place. But again, the U.S. government claimed at the beginning that they were targeting violent and serious criminals, those who are a real risk to the U.S. citizens. And this seems to have also changed in the direction because they seem to be sending people with no criminality and such. But at the same time, they are illegally in the country. They are being targeted to be deported, and they are wasting no time in making this happen. Now, as I said, the C-17 Globemaster 3s are a military plane that are generally used for evacuation out of emergency zones and for resupply and the transportation of troops, of course, into sometimes challenging areas. They are a very diverse aircraft. They have a lot of flexibility in terms of their capabilities and their uses. But at the same time, it seems like all engines are firing on the runways to start heading in different directions. Now, we also know that as a part of this program, Donald Trump has also ordered the reopening of Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, where there are criminals that pose a great risk in re-entering the U.S., where the U.S. feels that returning them to their native countries will not secure the U.S. for the simple fact that the governments there will not prevent them from boarding planes or any other methods to sneak back into the United States to continue on with criminality. So, of course, with that, they're looking to open 30,000 beds in Guantanamo Bay. Now, it should also be noted that Trump is floating the idea and actually has been in negotiations with several Central American countries and others to house the American criminals who are just, they are American citizens as well as foreign nationals, to actually house them in a method to save money for the federal government by hiring out or contracting out the actual incarceration of criminals to third world countries. It saves the U.S. a huge amount of money, but at the same time, it brings revenue into the prison systems in these countries that are very much suffering from budgetary restrictions. Now, we know that recent visits by the Deputy of State or the Secretary of State into El Salvador and Colombia and different regions in that area, they've also been putting that out. And several of the countries have said, yes, we will take your prisoners. But keep in mind that the international human rights groups have concerns about the overcrowding, the decrepit conditions of the physical structures and facilities, as well as the lack of human rights. And, of course, Americans are quite upset when it comes to the activists and the other advocates, because they feel that this is really demonstrating the fact that the U.S. is all about punitive and warehousing the criminals as opposed to any type of actual rehabilitation to reintegrate them into society. So again, it's looking at where it's going to be enforced, where it's going to be used. But make no mistake, they are sending these planes to the different nations around the world. And although more expensive, a part of that is a PR campaign to really, really make a statement that, hey, you don't want to come to the U.S. illegally. Because, look, we are employing the use of our military, of the FBI, of the Secret Service, of the IRS agents. They are basically bringing all hands on deck to go after especially the violent or the repeat criminals, but also anybody else that is illegally in the nation. And again, that plane with the first 205 heading back to India is expected to land Wednesday afternoon in Amritsar. The government there is ready. They have taken steps to ensure that they are able to process the returning nationals when they get home. Some are going to be obviously looked at in terms of any criminal or outstanding charges that they have in India, but others are just people that were illegally working in the U.S. that have been deported. And that, by some standards, is being called out by various government officials in India, saying that they are disappointed with the movement by the U.S. to include these individuals in the deportation so early in the process and before any real, negotiation has taken place when it comes to non-criminal immigrants. And they are really worried that, some of these people were hardworking, tax-paying citizens in the U.S., so they were contributing to the betterment of U.S. society. They were contributing tax dollars, they were contributing pension dollars, and they were also sending a part of that income back to India to help their families there that may be living in poverty or struggling in themselves, Angus. So it is a very divisive policy. It's a very divisive action, but at the same time, it shows that Donald Trump meant business when he said he is going to go after those who are illegally in the U.S. and start just shipping them en masse back to their home countries.
Yeah, I mean, Is anybody surprised? He's doing exactly what he was voted in for. I mean, the only surprise is finally we've got somebody who's elected as a president or a leader of a country who's actually doing what he promised. I mean, unfortunately, we never get the same here in the UK. We never get that privilege of anybody we elect certainly immediately rescinds or reneges on every promise they've ever made. So it's actually, I have to say, a breath of fresh air to actually see a leader actually immediately deliver, and I mean immediately deliver on what he promised. Now, this is radical stuff. I mean, he really is. He's getting on with it. He's, as I said at the time, he's hit the ground running. He said, I will deport people, I will deport illegal immigrants, and that is exactly what he's doing. Now, when we look at actually, in practical terms, yeah, it's a small number. And actually, the cost, if you look at the individual cost per illegal immigrant to repatriate, it's enormous. And of course, it's unsustainable, chartering these massive aeroplanes, and it's whatever it is, tens of thousands of dollars per illegal immigrant to repatriate. Of course, we can't, if we scale that up, it's unsustainable. That's not the point. The point is, this is all about the optics. This is all about sending a message. This is saying, look, I'm going to do what I promised to do, and whatever it costs, we will do it. In reality, yes, these first, 100,000 or first few 100,000 illegals he's repatriating are going to be unsustainably expensive. But the marginal cost as the process goes on is going to drop. And in reality, what it's doing is actually, firstly, it's reducing massively the inflow of illegal immigrants, because people are now going to start saying, I don't think I'm going to get away with it, so let's find somewhere else to go to. So that's one of the first biggest impacts it's going to have. And secondly, a lot of illegal immigrants in the US are now probably going to be thinking, yeah, I better leave before I'm thrown out. I'll leave on my own terms. So it's going to start the outflow again. And likewise, it's also going to, the whole process is going to get a bit more streamlined, etc., etc. So this is just the blunt end. This is or to use a paradoxical phrase, the sharp end of the policy, and it's working, and it will work. I've absolutely no doubt that it will have this impact. Of course, this is the low-hanging fruit. These are the easy ones to deport. It's obviously going to get harder from here on in, but it will also get cheaper, I think. Now, of course, you referred, James, correctly that there is collateral damage in this. There are going to be people who technically were illegal immigrants, but actually in practical terms were still contributing to the US society. They are the collateral damage to this, and that is a sad shame. Unfortunately, this is going to happen. This is an inevitable consequence of something like this, of a policy like this. But you could turn this around and you could say that actually the left-wing process also had collateral damage, where they opened the doors and they were a lot more liberal and they said, yeah, come in. And the collateral damage of that was actually more damaging. The collateral damage was letting in people who were actually parts of organised crime or who were terrorists, etc. So you could say, look, yeah, unfortunately there's collateral damage of this policy, but the collateral damage of the opposing policy is actually people die. People were being killed by organised crime, criminal gangs or terrorists, etc. So it swings and roundabouts. It's unfortunately, it's pick your side on this one. I did pick up in the press, and you mentioned it as well, James. This, what actually I chuckle when I read this, is this El Salvador option. And in fact, I think, 2 years ago, I think I reported on the prisons in El Salvador, and the president of El Salvador set up this prison, and he just imported criminals into these prisons. Draconian clampdown. All the gangs that were, El Salvador was ungovernable. It was dangerous to even walk down the street at one stage. The killings were, the murder rate was just unbelievable. So the president, backed obviously by the terrified people, just installed draconian measures and just mass imprisoned all these gangs and kept them under this dreadfully draconian regime. The photos emerging were horrifying, but the murder rate dropped, I think, by 97%. 97%. That is getting results. And this, the more extreme end, this is essentially Trumpism. This is what Trump's doing. By draconian measures, he's delivering results. You might not like it, but it's delivering the results. And that, I think, is an interesting angle to this. And this also is obviously a direct contrast of left-wing to right-wing. The right-wing attitude is Okay, we'll deliver results, but it's going to hurt. But if you want results, this is the price to pay, and this is obviously right-wing policies in action. You don't want immigration, you don't want illegal immigrants. We'll act on it, but it's going to hurt people, and that's what it is. So, and I think people are willing to pay the price now. People have suffered so much under this wave of illegal immigration. And of course, I'm referring here to Europe just as much as the US. Is that the backlash is then it's got to stop, but it can only be stopped at a price, and this is the price. Unfortunately, there is going to be collateral damage. It is going to hurt, but this is what is required to reverse these years of left-wing liberalism. Now, interestingly, you referred also, James, there to a problem that we've also massively had and still have here in Europe, and that is left-wing leaning or liberal lawyers who are gaming the system on behalf of these illegal immigrants. They know that they can, as soon as an immigrant comes into a country, UK is a primary sufferer of this, and it's happened in the US, is that as soon as we try to deport them, because we know they're illegal, they then immediately arm themselves with a legal team, and this legal team knows how to play the system. They know how to game the system. And these illegal immigrants can literally stay in the country for years, clogging up the legal system, knowing full well they can just keep appealing, come up with all sorts of nonsense arguments, like, oh, I've just converted to Christianity. Oh, I'm gay. A lot of illegal immigrants suddenly became gay Christians because they know that we can't deport them to certain countries, back to their home countries, because they will then be persecuted. And again, they just know how to game the system. And that's the problem that we've been up against. And Trump has come in and said, no, this stops now. We need to put some common sense into this system. We need to stop it being abused, because of course there is perfectly good legal immigration system that works. People can legally migrate to the United States, but you've got to do it properly. And the same across Europe, same in Australia, all these countries. I'd love to suddenly move to Australia tomorrow, but I can't. I've got to go through a legal process. Those processes are in place for a reason, and that is what has been abused. That is why we find ourselves in the situation that we're in, is because there are millions of people globally who are abusing the kindness of Western countries like the United States and the sanctuary that they offer. They're abusing these systems, and they're abusing it by importing illegal criminals, by importing the crime gangs, criminality, terrorism even at the far end, etc., etc. So, James, I think we're just seeing what Trump promised. And as I say, like him or loathe him, he's delivering on what he was elected for.
Yeah, and as a journalist, I mean, I've actually received video files from inside of Central American prisons, where they literally beheaded someone and carried the person's head on a machete and put it in a bin. I mean, I got these videos out of from criminals there trying to raise awareness of the conditions. And yet, of course, we couldn't use them or put them in media because of the fact that we're not glorifying that. And some people would see that as glorifying the violence, but we did report on the violence that's happening in those prisons. And I'll tell you that maybe one thing Trump's right about. These criminals that the U.S. ships to these prisons, they will be begging to get back to the U.S. and they will promise with all of their might to behave themselves. So let's face it, that is definitely, I agree with them there that the hardened criminals are going to realize they are nothing in comparison to some of these countries. And yeah, when it comes to the immigration system being exploited and such, we're seeing that right now in Canada as well, where a lot of students who have come to Canada to study, now with the cutback on all of the study visas and the expulsion of people who are overstaying their welcomes, all of a sudden we have had a major jump in asylum seekers, claiming that now they're not students, they're asylum seekers because they can't go home, and yet they had no problem going home at the end of their studies as planned, but now that we're kicking them out, it's just open to abuse. So legalized, proper, controlled immigration is great, but when you just open the floodgates and don't do the proper processes, that's how we end up with people such as the Indian nationals that are involved in transnational repression and are currently on trial for the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar here in Surrey, British Columbia. So again, it's about a controlled and responsible immigration process and doing it the right way. And I think that is something that a lot of the advocacy groups are overlooking, and they're just screaming bloody murder about everything. So again, it's all about getting all of the facts and making informed decisions. And on that, of course, Canada, with the wrap up of the foreign interference study, again, it's all about having that information and starting to make recommendations moving forward. And that's what we're going to look at now, Angus, is that they have made those preliminary or in the final report, a list of recommendations. We're not going to go through them all just because it is quite lengthy and we've only got a shorter time for this show. We don't have hours or days to go through it all. But I wanted to touch down on some and just encourage people to actually go on to the Government of Canada website and actually download a copy of the full report, even if you don't read it all. There are some very interesting and telling bits of information in there. So let's just go through this very quickly here, though, is that CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, should develop mechanisms to clearly flag reports that it views as particularly relevant for some or all senior decision makers and advisors. We covered this a bit more in depth already, so I won't spend time on that one, but just pointing it out. Intelligence collectors should encourage their regular intelligence clients, such as the Privy Council, the Public Safety of Canada, and the Global Affairs Canada, to provide feedback on the intelligence they receive, whether by using existing feedback mechanisms and channels or by creating new ones. And again, that helps to bring better communication in both directions to and from the intelligence community and those who need to react or be aware of it. So it just, again, adds another layer of safety net that they have actually received the report and reviewed it. And again, that was one of the findings in the Commission's findings report, was that not all of the important intelligence information was being labeled correctly or being reviewed appropriately. And that is one of the ways of helping to fix that. Now, there are other national security and intelligence community recommendations, including the declassification system that allows government to make certain information public where it is in the public interest and where it would not unduly prejudice national security. Again, it's all about that communication, and in this case, more information and communication with the general public or with different community organizations that may be the target of such foreign interference or even transnational repression. And we've seen an increase on that, whether it is the People's Republic of China or within the Indian government or agencies that are threatening or targeting the Sikh community. We've seen some improvement on that. But again, this was a result of the intelligence community and the commission sitting down with these diasporas and getting the facts, getting the information, getting the concerns and the fears of the different communities, whether it was the Sikh community, the Korean community, the Chinese, it doesn't matter. They sat down with hundreds and hundreds of people to get feedback. And that, again, is being communicated through this public report. And that, again, is a way to encourage better awareness about the threats to Canadian society, Canadian citizens, and visitors alike. So again, with higher levels of awareness and education, of course, we're going to see more reaction and the ability to report. The Government of Canada has also, that's not here in this section of the report, but they have also opened up some online portals with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the RCMP to do online reporting of different threats, whether that's foreign interference or transnational repression, cyber security, and so forth. So they're already taking some of the recommendations and suggestions from preliminary reports and instituting those already. So that shows the urgency to which Canada is acting and moving forward with not only reviewing the report and the recommendations, but actually implementing them. Another area of concern was, of course, parliamentarians and MPs who may have been influenced, acting with or a party to foreign interference. And again, although they failed to name anybody specifically, they also went in this report to say that even though they had reports, even though they had intelligence, that releasing any of the names directly would interfere with the due process of law and the ability for these individuals to properly defend themselves within a court system or a legal system, which could breach their rights. So again, there were reasons why they did withhold those names and didn't move forward with that part in the report. I think that a lot of Canadians and the international community are disappointed in the fact that we didn't get names of those who have been involved in foreign interference. But again, let's hope that more is done to keep tabs on it now moving forward. And let's hope that further investigations actually start to release some of that information, because I think that it is essential that we know further details about which parties and which individuals may have played a role in foreign interference directly or indirectly, especially coming up to an election here in 2025. I think that that is very important, and that was also one of the findings and recommendations in this report, was that more steps be taken before the 2025 election. Now, the recommendations went on to third-party political financing, as well as penalties increasing. But another one is that they are looking at having the Elections Canada and that agency more involved year-round, not just during election cycles, but actually having representatives available 365 days a year in order to deal with threats and to monitor ongoing possible involvement or interference within our political system and our electoral process. So with that, we're going to end our coverage of that particular part of the report right now, because that's a fair amount of information. Again, I encourage you to get a copy of the report. I encourage you to read it and to look at that. And remember that there is also coverage in there of that touches on the interference in the U.S. election of 2014, as well as potential interference in the UK elections and the Brexit. So yeah, there's a lot of information in it that applies to Canadians and Canadian systems, and but also the influence of these other potential involvements and how that influenced the urgency for us to protect our systems here in Canada and our democracy. So there you go, Angus. We may see more coming in other areas, such as in the UK, in the US, when it comes to really clamping down on the foreign interference and transnational repression.
Yeah, I think, I suppose the immediate knee-jerk reaction to this report and the recommendations is slight disappointment. I think, all of us were hoping for something a bit more juicier, a bit more meatier, a bit more sort of damning. In reality, it was more of unfortunately, a bit more of an administrative exercise. Really, it was very much a dry, administrative, looking at the process, the system exercise to see where it's gone wrong. So ultimately, it never was going to reveal any sort of headline-grabbing, salacious details. So in that respect, I suppose from our perspective, it's slightly disappointing. But in reality, actually, it's a very, very powerful report, really, if you look at the implications as we've talked about over the last few days. I think what's interesting is it is actually, and I think this is a stepping stone to actually more significant things, because this report is actually laying some important foundations. And I think, again, it's all very boring and below the surface, but these foundations are very important to actually achieving, let's say, the headline grabbing things that will come in time. Because it actually, a lot of this reflects what's happened here in the UK, a lot of the administrative steps that the Sikh community have done here in the UK. And it actually relates to, for example, hate crimes, which does sort of parallel in many interesting ways. The problem with hate crimes, for example, and this isn't just in the UK, it's across North America as well and down under, is that we don't know how much has been going on, because people, firstly, have been afraid to report it, and secondly, when they do report it, what is the process? How is that information collated and used? And it hasn't really been used in the past to actually highlight the fact that this is going on. And this is the same with transnational repression in North America, is we don't actually know how much of it has been going on because there actually isn't a formal system to report it, to identify it, and then do something about it. And this is exactly what this report is all about. And again, reflected in the hate crimes. This is what, for example, the Sikh Federation and other organisations here in the UK have been really, really strong about in recent years. They're saying, look, we need to set in place a system that first of all allows the reporting of these things to happen so that they are formally reported, they are formally recorded. Once they're formally recorded, then statistics can be actually put together. We can work out how big a problem this genuinely is and work out, okay, where is this problem? What specifically is the problem? What areas? What is happening? And by creating statistics, then of course policies can be put into place to act on this. And this is exactly what's happening here with this report. All very dry and boring, and a lot of this report is all about, well, look, we need to, first of all, set in place a system where these TNR can be reported. It can then be, we can then statisticize, if that's such a word. We can create statistics about what it is, where it's occurring, etc., etc. And then once we know that, then we can institute policies that we can put in place to act and react to these situations. And it's these foundations that must be put in place first before the next step is when these things do occur in future. Then we can immediately highlight what has happened. We can immediately put it in that box, put it into the public domain. This is what's happened. It falls under this crime, and this is what a country like India have been doing. It actually makes it unambiguous, legally clear, and legally formalizes an act of transnational repression, so there can be no argument against it. There's no grey area, there's no ambiguity, and that, unfortunately, this is the necessary boring step, should we say, the administrative step that needs to be put in place to allow that to happen in future. So that, I think, is one of the big takeaways of this. The other one, of course, is the names, naming the names involved. And yes, we've been disappointed, obviously, and maybe our expectations were a little bit too high on this. It was unlikely, and it's rightly so. Again, if you look at it from a legal perspective, the law must be enacted impartially, coldly, without emotion, and fairly and judicially.
That's right.
And this is exactly what's happened. You cannot name names when an ongoing case is being pursued, because the person may be innocent. He may be guilty, but is presumed innocent until guilty. And so names must not be revealed until a verdict has been achieved, because it's not fair and it might influence that due process of law that must remain impartial. So unfortunately, legally, it's absolutely right, and I do agree with the report, is that we can't release names whilst there are ongoing investigations. However, once those investigations are completed, then absolutely those names must be released, and anybody tarnished, smeared, tainted or connected to any act of influence from a foreign power absolutely must be named, and all their involvement must be highlighted in the public domain, particularly if they are a public servant, a politician or whatever, a civil servant. If they have any influence from a foreign nation, then that absolutely must be shared, only after, of course, they have been found guilty of that through a due process of law. So, James, I think we have to temper our expectations. Absolutely there must be transparency, and absolutely we must let the due, fair process of law unfold as it should do. But as soon as that is completed, anybody found guilty of anything in this domain must be publicly named and shamed, James.
And that's if they proceed with further investigation, or they just push it aside now and move forward from here. And that is definitely a possibility in politics. Angus, we know that from the US, from Canada, from the UK, from, Zimbabwe. We know that, there is a certain level of protection for the political circle. So we'll have to wait and see.
Well, that segues very neatly onto my first story, James. And we talk about the breakdown of the rule of law in India. Well, of course, we do know, and we often talk about the events of the 1980s and the 1990s in the Punjab. And during that dreadful period, there were hundreds of thousands of young Sikh men were murdered, were extrajudicially killed. And many of the guilty during that period still remain free. And we do often proselytise, there's a big word. We do often lecture from our pulpit here on Satellite TV News that we must never forget those events. And it's very easy for the young generation to forget, to not even know about these events. And they just want to move on. They want to just get on with life and let's forgive and forget. Is quite often the case. And certainly it's in the Indian state's interest for that to happen. The Indian state certainly want to move on and forget about those events of the 1980s and 1990s. But those events must not be forgotten for very good reason. And just to use an old quote that's often quoted in situations, is if you don't learn from the past, then you are doomed to repeat it. And those events that happened in 1980 must never be forgotten. The generations that experienced that in the 80s and 90s in the Sikh community must certainly pass those experiences, those memories, those horrific memories from that time down to the younger generation so the younger generation can understand, firstly, what the Indian state is and was capable of, secondly, that it could still happen again quite easily if you let it happen, and thirdly, that the guilty must still be held to account. And there's actually a very interesting comment, which we'll cover later on in the comments, which refers to that very thing, this act of never forgetting and holding those to account. So with all that in mind, I'm going to jump back to the 39th anniversary. 39 years ago yesterday was the anniversary of another one of just so many extrajudicial killings. There were 4 young Sikh men were murdered by police in 1986. This occurred. And I'm just going to run through what happened in that day in 1986, just as a gentle reminder, in fact it's not so gentle, as a brutal reminder really, of what the Indian state was up to in that time. Again, just to remind, particularly for our younger viewers and those who weren't alive in these times, this is what happened in the 1980s. This is what went on. This is what was allowed to happen by the Indian government. And those that perpetrated this are still alive, many of them, and are still running free. Does that sound to you like something that should occur? I'll just cherry pick. This is from an article that I actually written a few years ago. That just illustrates what actually happened. Just to give you some of the facts. It says 4 victims were killed extrajudicially in the Nakadar police shooting incident on February the 4th, 1986. That's 39 years ago yesterday. The agony of family members and loved ones have not ended. The parents of 3 of the victims have passed away since, awaiting justice and closure. So what happened on that day? Well, on February the 2nd, 1986, 5 Guru Granth Sahib Jis at a Gurdwara were burned. These are the Holy Scriptures, were burned in an incident. There was a suspicion within the local Sikh community that this was the work of miscreants belonging to the radical outfit Shiv Sena. On February the 4th, local Sikh organisations staged a peaceful march to secure the burned text and also show the community's frustration with the police's negligent attitude towards their genuine grievances as a curfew was imposed. So even back then, we see this anti-Sikh sentiment from the local police force. So immediately there was this 2-tier policing where they were harder on the local Sikh community than anybody else. While the procession was walking towards the Gurdwara, the police opened fire without warning with the intent to kill. One among the 5 men leading the peaceful march, Ravinder Singh, was killed on the spot. As the mounted police hunted for those trying to escape, Baldir Singh and Jilman Singh were killed at a nearby farm. The 4th victim, Harminder Singh, in a clear case of vengeance and targeted killing, was forced to come out of hiding from a sawmill and shot in the mouth at point-blank range. Harminder was the district convener of the Sikh Students' Federation and had been critical of police brutality against Sikhs in his speeches. So clearly this was a very deliberate targeted killing of somebody who's spoken out against police brutality. The news of police firing quickly spread to the nearby villages. The city was now under complete lockdown, so the police they realised what they'd done. Baldev Singh's, the father of Ravinder Singh, was led into room number 26 of the nearby hospital in Nakadar by police officers on duty, where he saw 3 bodies on the ground. The 4th body, that of Harminder Singh, was on a stretcher. Now, witnesses would later reveal that Harminder was actually still alive at this stage when police brought what they thought were 4 dead bodies to the local hospital. When doctors tried to save him, the police officer in charge insisted that they take him to the district hospital, about a 45-minute drive away from this local hospital, in a police vehicle. Now, it's suspected The police deliberately took him away to wait long enough for him to die, and then brought his body back to the local hospital for post-mortem. The post-mortem of all four was done in the dark of the night. So clearly, there's a very clear suspicion here that the police, when they realised that Hamida was still alive and therefore could talk about what happened, they took him, they insisted, they used their police powers to say, no, we'll take him to the district hospital. Basically, they stuck him in a police car, no witnesses, drove around for 45 minutes or whatever until he died, and then brought him back saying, oh no, sorry, he's dead. So again, it just highlights what went on here. It's outrageous. Now, after their deaths, all four bodies were burned together by the police during the early hours of February the 5th. So immediately, literally a few hours later, they were cremated. There was no due process, no allowance of post-mortems or anything. They deliberately ensured that no post-mortems could be carried out. They took the bodies away and they ensured that they were cremated literally within hours. The police records would claim that the bodies were unclaimed and unidentified. And this is despite countless evidence and witnesses saying otherwise. It was nonsense. The police were obviously in a hurry to burn the bodies, and with them the proof of their extrajudicial killing. The post-mortem reports would of course have shown that all the victims had been shot from a close range and into their vital organs. The police shooting was intended not to disperse a crowd, but to cause maximum casualties. Now, there were various official reports after the event, and one of those official reports concluded that the order that effective firing should be on the lower part of the body was totally ignored, and it appears that the four persons who died were aimed at the vital parts of their bodies so as to kill them. So clearly, normal standard operating procedure for the police in this situation was to minimise casualties, minimise damage. If you're going to use live rounds to a crowd, you must not aim high, you must aim low. So you're hitting their legs and feet, not their vital organs in their body. Clearly, all those who were shot and injured or killed on that day were shot in the chest and through their vital organs. There's very clear evidence this was deliberately targeted to kill as many people as possible. The report continued, the police firing at Nakadar on that day was therefore not justified and could be avoided. In the immediate aftermath of the firing incident, accused police officers were temporarily suspended, but then reinstated as soon as the media coverage died down. Two of the accused police officers would go on to become senior leaders in the governing party that hid the judicial report for years. And of course, it goes on at great length, this report. We don't have time to go into it. But basically, this report goes on at great length how all the official reports that actually found the police guilty of extrajudicial killing were buried. They were suddenly magically disappeared. They were suddenly not available, etc. In other words, those people trying to uncover what happened on that day, all the evidence was basically either buried or destroyed. Again, very typical of what happened during that time. And actually very typical. And we talk about Singh Kalra, who likewise was extrajudicially killed, the Shaheed, that martyr who highlighted what was going on and the deliberate covering up by the police. He himself was murdered for highlighting incidents such as this. Since the filing of the court case in 2019 in the State High Court, of course, the families are still, even to this day, trying to achieve justice. So there was this case in 2019. The proceedings have not moved at all, as the police and state agencies keep putting up roadblocks, keep denying access to information necessary for the case to proceed. Now, James, how often have we heard about that? The rule of law in India is only in name only, unfortunately. We've got four young Sikhs who were extrajudicially killed, murdered by the police. These four are just four of tens of thousands. This is just one tragic story of so many similar tragic stories, and it just follows the same pattern. Young Sikh men who were extrajudicially murdered by police. What followed then was a deliberate police cover-up. They covered up their own criminality. The state moved in to assist them to cover up and bury their criminality. The Indian state are implicated just as much. And this isn't just the Indian state in the 1980s and the 1990s. This is the present, the current Indian state, because those guilty parties, many of them are still alive and running free today. The evidence that would indict them, that would send them to prison where they belong, has been long since buried. It remains buried. The Indian state is slowing up the process of law. It is deliberately ensuring that the guilty will not be found guilty in a court of law. The law machine in India is broken. It is not just flawed, it is broken. Under the BJP government, it is deliberately slowing up justice. It is deliberately ensuring that the people it is protecting are never finding justice, James. This is typical of what is going on even in today's India.
And something that we've talked about time and time again, Angus, that, it still goes on. And several things. I mean, the fact that they took this young man, Mr. Harman, out of the medical facility, and then they brought him back in the dead of night once he had succumbed to the injuries. And I can almost guarantee that he was not taken anywhere else for any type of care. But then to further desecrate the remains of these individuals by a group cremation instead of allowing their families to have any type of ceremonial cremation as they do. And then to, just throw them all in as a group and say, oh, nobody claimed them. Well, it happened within hours, Angus. How could the family possibly claim them within a few hours or within even, that timeline? When, let's face it, the families probably did not know the full extent or even the location of the individuals or the condition of these individuals, let alone the ability to go to that particular facility to claim the bodies. I mean, it's just atrocious that these people are still walking free and haven't been held accountable for what they did to these 4 individuals and all of their families.
Absolutely, and we often say, Mr. Modi, who bestrides the world stage, shaking the hands of global leaders, demanding essentially to be treated with respect. Well, it's very simple, Mr. Modi. If you want to be treated with respect, what are you doing about this? Why is this stain still attached to your government? Why are you not acting on this? Why are the guilty still walking free? Why are the families, most of actually the parents of these poor young men have since passed away, but their existing families are still demanding justice? Why are you not doing anything about this? Why are you not proving to the world that you are a genuinely democratic country that follows the rule of law? At the moment, all the evidence points to the fact that you are not democratic and that you do not follow the rule of law. Certainly no rule of law that we recognise here in Western democracies. So it's very simple to me, James. It's absolutely appalling. So, okay, let's move on then to my second story. And I often do like to dip into the bear pit of social media, particularly X, Twitter, of the right-wing Hindutva activists, just to get a flavour, just to get a taste of what the current prevailing mindset is. What are they talking about? What are they spitting venom about? What are they campaigning about? What are they active about? What is upsetting them these days? And it's always I always find it a fascinating read, just to dip into several of the high-profile ones, more high-profile ones. Just to get a feeling of what they're feeling at the time, right? How the right wing are viewing the world, how they're viewing their own country, etc. And one of the Twitter profiles that I do like to look at regularly is Mr. Sinha. He's a very well-known and obviously very controversial right-wing Hindutva extremist. He posts up a lot on a daily basis. And he posted up something yesterday that I just picked up. I did actually find quite interesting because it actually, again, it gives a snapshot of the prevailing mindset of the Indian right wing, the extremists, the nationalists. And his post yesterday said, "Have you ever seen the Indian tricolour in other communities' religious events? It's rare. You'll always find it in Hindu festivals or events." Now, this actually is quite an interesting insight from his side, because basically what he's saying is saying, look, if you go to any typical Hindu event, you'll always see the Indian tricolour flying high. It's branded proudly. Yeah, absolutely you do. And that actually shows this tie-in between India, the Indian flag, and Hinduism and Hindu nationalism. I don't think we could argue against that. But what he's also pointing out, and this is more interesting, he's actually recognising the fact, but it's not actually a guaranteed fact, and I'll come on to that in a moment, but he's pointing to what he believes is the fact that, look, all these other religious communities, and particularly he's obviously referring to the Islamic community, but also to the Sikh community and the Christian community, you go to their religious events, you never see, or very rarely see, the Indian tricolour. And he's saying, yeah, look, you see, we're the patriots, it's these other minorities that are not. Well, there's lots of reactions to that, and I'll come on to some of the public reactions, but I've got my own thoughts, and obviously we on our channel will have our own thoughts on this. But the very clear response to that is why do you think that is? Why do you honestly think that is? And I think this is true. Not absolutely true, but it is true to a large extent. And the reason is very clear. It is because of Hindutva nationalism. It is because these minorities have been so increasingly marginalised that you are disengaging them from India. They don't see India. Many of these minorities now don't see India as their country, as certainly looking after their interests, because they are increasingly persecuted under its government, under this BJP nationalist, extremist, right-wing government. That is why the Muslims are increasingly disengaging. That is why the Sikhs are increasingly disengaging. And likewise, the Christians, certainly what's happening in Manipur, is manifesting this very same disengagement, this breaking away. And I use that term breaking away deliberately because this, of course, feeds into this narrative now that is really gaining momentum, that India is potentially breaking up because of this very thing that Mr. Sinha is actually highlighting. This is a symptom of what is going on the ground, genuinely happening in India. All these different cultural buckets, let's call them, of religious minorities are actively disengaging. They are actively saying, why are we part of this country called India? Because at the moment, this government that's been in power for over 10 years doesn't speak for me. All it's doing is persecuting me. It's actually making my life harder. It is actually making me feel less Indian than a Hindu, because these Indians, they seem to represent India, but I don't. This India that they represent isn't me. It's not representing my cultural identity. In fact, I'm feeling more and more less part of India. And that, I think, is symptomatic of what is genuinely happening and what Mr. Sinha, I think, unwittingly is pointing out. But actually, and as we often argue, okay, fine, this is, and I think this is, as I often say, a strategy that I think the Khalistan movement needs to adopt more aggressively. Yes, absolutely. The tricolour is now becoming increasingly embedded into the Hindu nationalist mindset. It is becoming more attached to the Hindu Rashtra than it is to the minorities like Khalistan, like Manipur Christians, like J&K Muslims, etc. This flag of I'm saying yours deliberately because it's not the flag of us, it's not the flag of the Sikhs, it's not the flag of the Muslims, it's not the flag of the Christians, increasingly so. So it is actually, I think, symptomatic and helping this subtle, gentle, slow breakup. It's breaking apart. The cracks are appearing now that, as I say, it only takes that one catalytic event, but the foundations are being laid. And I think Mr. Sinha's post is symptomatic of that. Now, let's look at some of the public reactions. That's obviously my thoughts. James, you can give us your thoughts on this in a moment. But some of the public reactions, again, I think speak volumes and say a lot about, again, the feeling on the ground. Nirvana, again, obviously a right-wing supporter, he says Hindus are the true patriots, and for a reason. We don't have 57 countries we can run to. Pretty simple. We will protect the integrity and interests of our nation, come what may. Yeah, absolutely. This is Indian nationalism. But actually, is it Indian nationalism? It's more Hindu nationalism, and they actually are becoming one and the same thing. And by attaching Hindu to nationalism, Indian nationalism, you're pushing out the minorities without realising it. This is why the Muslims are feeling decreasingly attached to India, likewise the Sikhs and Christians, etc. So again, I think these nationalists are not realising what they're doing, but actually it's working in the favour of Khalistan, and this is why I say the Khalistan movement should adopt this same tactic. Yeah, have your Hindu nationalism, have your Hindu Rashtra. Yeah, break away from us. Let's break away. You can have it. We will do everything in our power to assist you to have your Hindu Rashtra, but in return, you give us our Khalistan. And that to me, everyone's a winner on that one. That's an argument that we should be pursuing. Anyway, but a Muslim wades into the argument. Awakened Muslim. Once India, de facto Hindu Rashtra, again, this is the point, starts treating other communities on par with Hindus, you'll be able to see the tricolour in Muslim, Sikh and Christian gatherings as well. But it might then disappear from Hindu gatherings, ironically. In other words, if you start treating the communities, as I've said, if you start treating the minorities a little bit better, then those minorities will actually adopt the tricolour. They'll be happy to do so, but at the moment they don't feel happy to do so. But ironically, if the minorities adopt it, then you still see yourselves as different, so you'll probably end up with a different flag, your own flag, etc., etc. Now, Jana Kundu says it's not possible for other communities because they don't love Bharat. They love the land that they're occupying and always planning to cut it away. Now, this is a comment that is actually wrong in many ways. It's right in some ways. It's clearly targeted at the Islamic population, and the right-wing Hindutva see Islam as having encroached on India. They see them as almost as illegal immigrants. When in fact, look at Jammu and Kashmir. Those aren't illegal immigrants. That is their land. They were born and bred for generations in Kashmir and Jammu and all those areas. So they haven't occupied those lands. They've always occupied those lands. Likewise in the Punjab. The Sikhs have always occupied the Punjab. They're not the ones occupying it. The ones who are occupying it illegally, as far as the Khalistan movement is concerned, are you. It's the Hindus who have been encouraged, deliberately encouraged, to colonise the Punjab and J&K through all these deliberate policies brought in by the RSS to deliberately dilute the indigenous Sikhs in the Punjab, the indigenous Muslims in J&K, likewise in other areas, in Manipur actually, in northeast India. Likewise, same thing going on. This deliberate pouring in of other people. It's reflected in the Middle East, the Israel-Gaza or the Israel-Palestine issue. That same accusation has been pushed there. This is what's happening in India. It's you guys from the Hindu nationalists who are guilty of occupying these sorts of lands. So a massive hypocrisy there. And then Avinashi says, they only use tricolour only for protests. As for them, religion first, then something else. For Hindu, it's country first. Yeah, and actually, this brings in this argument. Is it religion first? Is it country first? And yeah, Hindus do put your country first. Is that right? I don't know. That's open to an argument. There's all sorts of different subtleties in this argument. We don't have time to go into those, but I thought it was quite an interesting argument just to throw in there. And then the final couple of comments. This is again an interesting insight. I didn't actually know this. The tricolour wasn't seen at the RSS headquarters until 2002. They filed a case against people who tried to unfurl the tricolour at their headquarters, but no surprise from Sons of Jinnah. Jinnah, of course, was the founder of Pakistan. He was the All India Muslim League leader, and he was responsible for essentially the breakaway of Pakistan at that time. And Ghaznfar Ibrahim says, look, you'll see if you want to see, but how can an and backed translates as a blind supporter, but how can a blind supporter see? By the way, did anyone see the tricolour over the RSS headquarters in the period between 1950, that's when India became a republic, and 2001, 2002. In other words, I didn't know this, but the RSS banned the tricolour, clearly, until 2002. It's only since 2002 that they've allowed the tricolour to be associated with the RSS. I think that opens up a can of worms, as we call it, James. So again, anyway, that's just a snapshot. And as I say, it's always interesting just to take a snapshot every now and again of the Hindutva social media, again, just to see how the prevailing thought is. What's interesting about this, James, is the prevailing thought from one of the high-profile big mouthpieces of Hindutva is he's recognising the minorities are breaking away. These are the cracks I keep talking about that are appearing in India. These are the cracks that are leading to the breakup of India, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And a couple of points there that I marked down here was that their oppression of the minorities has created that isolationism within the different cultures and communities. And when there is that lack of trust and that they are feeling threatened, the minorities that is feeling threatened by the majority, then of course that doesn't create any type of synergy between the groups. And in closing on that, I'd also say that, in the past, when they've tried to make those connections with the Hindutva and the extremists, they've tried to make some type of connection in moving peace forward and progress, and yet it turns around and it ends up weaponized against the minorities, and it backfires. So again, why would they want to continue to build on that when they have seen nothing but betrayal in the past?
Absolutely, and that is something that we're seeing, and increasingly so. So this right-wing agenda pushing this division is actually creating, well, ironically, what they want, which is a Hindu Rashtra, but ironically, it's also what the Khalistan wants. Khalistan wants to break away, as does J&K, as do all these other areas. So they're actually creating the very thing, ironically, that everybody wants. It's just, I don't know, what is standing in the way? Only at the moment, this desire for the Hindu Rashtra to include all these peripheral areas. But what's the point? My argument is, what is the point? Why include these areas? They don't want to be a part of it, so why not just get rid of that problem once and for all, and you can have your Hindu Rashtra and everybody else gets what they want. So anyway, okay, James, let's move on. As always, we're well over time. Let's whip through our comments in our comments section.
At least we're consistent, Angus.
Absolutely. So our first comment comes again from Akash Deep Singh, who speaks French, and he says, "Votre programme à tous les deux était super," which very kindly translates as, "Your programme with both of you is superb." Well, thank you, Akash, for that very much. Merci beaucoup from both of us. And you say that, "I hope we Sikhs can bring back and judge the oppressors." Here we go. This is what we were talking about earlier. This is an interesting comment. "I hope we can bring back and judge the oppressors who committed these crimes against our community." And you name, for example, Jagdish Tytler, who currently is being tried very slowly, I have to say, for the Sikh genocide, the events of November 1984. Our example to follow would be the Jewish community, who also brought back the Nazi officers on the UN platform and condemned them legally. Yeah, now this ties in, James, to what we were saying earlier about bringing the guilty to account. It's happened. The Israel have shown a masterclass in never forgetting, in bringing to account, even decades later, 40, 50 years later, they are still they are finding those who are guilty of the Holocaust and dragging them, kicking and screaming, into a courtroom and to find them guilty of those dreadful, dreadful crimes of the 1940s. Well, unfortunately, but the difference here, though, Akash, and this is the sad thing, Israel is a powerful government with massive resources. The Indian government, likewise, massive and powerful, but they're on the wrong side. They're the guilty party. It's the Sikh community who don't have the power and resources of Israel, unfortunately, to hold the guilty to account. They are up against, unfortunately, a powerful state that has all those power and resources, who instead are doing everything in their power to prevent justice being seen. So unfortunately, it is not a parallel that we can draw until, ironically, Khalistan happens, James. When Khalistan happens, then they will have the power to drag the guilty to justice.
And it's just a matter of time, and we're waiting.
Absolutely we are. Now, Rajveer Dhillon makes this comment. "How's it possible? Why don't you analyse the latest statement of Tulsi Gabbard? Why you guys, are we daydreaming, James? The Trump administration appoints pawns of the RSS, the HSS and World Hindu Council in top posts." I'm sorry for negative comment. No, don't be sorry. Absolutely. Your comment is absolutely right. Thank you, Rajveer, for your comment. Tulsi Gabbard, this is a difficult one. And we talk about Trump and Trump's administration a lot. Tulsi Gabbard is, technically, she is not of Indian heritage. She is a practicing Hindu and is clearly very proud of the fact. She's actually from Hawaii. I think her heritage is Samoan or something. But she is the appointed head of the intelligence services. Is she connected to the RSS or HSS, etc.? The simple answer is I don't know. It's very hard, obviously, to prove this. She has Hindu loyalties. That doesn't necessarily mean RSS loyalties. I don't know, James. It's a very difficult one to call. We are concerned. We are watching her. What was her latest statement? I don't know. It's very hard. She's made so many statements. I've actually looked to try and find something controversial. I couldn't find anything. Rajveer, please email us. Please send us something that you found worrying, and I'll definitely take a look at it. And there is another gentleman, Kash Patel, who's been nominated, not appointed, nominated to head of the FBI, I think. Kash Patel is of Indian heritage. He does have, I would say, suspicious links to the Hindu nationalists, the RSS. That's certainly something that we are watching with interest. There are rumours, not confirmed, that he has withdrawn the state protection of Gurpratap Singh Pannoon. I think that is misinformation. Certainly can't corroborate it. And certainly I think it is misinformation because he actually hasn't been appointed yet, so he wouldn't have the power to do that. But yeah, Kash Patel, another appointee of Trump, one that we'll have to watch. Where Trump's loyalties lie, we don't know, or other than that his loyalties lie with the United States' best interests, his own best interests. James, I think we'll just have to keep an eye on this one.
Absolutely, and I think that my bigger concern at this point would be the Doge and Elon Musk and his cronies having full access to the Treasury Department, because that is not only a data breach for Americans, but anybody in the world who is a part of a treaty organization such as Canada, the UK, and other countries. Now, they have information if you file W-8 forms, if you have U.S. income. They actually have all of your personal information, and now this is a breach of international law, international privacy acts, as well as the tax treaty agreements themselves. So it's now, I know that there are complaints that have been recently filed with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police at the federal level and CSIS against Doge, against Musk, and against his representation that's working on his behalf for accessing the information of Canadians and Canadian corporations. So we'll watch. I have bigger concerns on that than I do with the others. So
yeah. So Rajveer, thank you for your comment, and it wasn't a negative comment; it was a very useful comment because it puts a spotlight on us. Say, are we right? Absolutely, we might be wrong, and it is the onus is on us now to actually investigate what you're claiming, and it's perfectly valid. So
oh, the pressure.
Absolutely. Simrat says, thanks, Scott, for the emotions that you put in while telling how Sikh activists in the UK are under strict scrutiny. Yeah, I do know this, and I genuinely, it's genuine this, because when I, for example, in Birmingham the other day at the sentencing of Deepa Singh, I was there in the thick of things, and actually for the first time, and surrounded by, there was police watching us from on high in the courtroom in the high-vis jackets. They were peering down at us, some plain-clothes gentlemen, clearly behind-the-scenes officers who were watching us all very closely. And I suddenly, for the first time, felt the spotlight of the British police staring at me, clearly wondering who I was and what my involvement was. So yeah, I feel for you. I think I empathise deeply with the Sikh community, and I do get passionate about it, because I think it's so unjustified after everything that the Sikh community has done for this nation. It does actually make me quite angry the way they've been treated. Yeah. So yeah, let's say I feel your pain, Simrat. So it's an absolute pleasure and honour to sit here and do that. And salute to this kind of truthful, unbiased reporting. That is what we're here for, James.
Absolutely, and it's all about the truth.
Indeed it is. Thank you, Simrat, for your comment. Jat Gabru, if the USA decides to establish a base and create Khalistan, it will be easy. The Brahmins won't have the guts to object. I don't think they will. I think once Khalistan is established, it's going to be very hard for the Brahmins in India to do anything about it, James.
Absolutely, but I think at that point the Brahmins are going to be smart enough to realize that if they become more friendly to the Khalistan nation, then it will be good for their trade, good for their country, good for their people, and the world in itself. So I think that at that point they're going to be licking their wounds, so to speak.
Well, indeed, and this is the point, that once you get your Hindu Rashtra, which, yeah, we're happy about as long as Khalistan is established, then it will be an amicable relationship. Let's get back to being grown-ups again. We can trade, we can do these things like grown-ups. That's what's going to happen. And that's actually something the Hindu Rashtra should think about. It actually will be in your benefit. Anjan says, and this is quite concerning, thousands of Sikhs were killed by other Sikhs to get promotions and bonuses during this dreadful time of the 80s and 90s. Even leaders of fighters made money by disclosing their whereabouts to Sikh police. Well, I can't comment on this, James. I don't know for a fact, but this is quite an accusation. Let's just say human beings are human beings. We're not all perfect. Yeah, I'm sure there were some bad apples in that cart, unfortunately, James.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, you're going to find in any group the people that are in it for themselves and to find self-gratification or benefit to it. And, that's how you end up with international double agents and, all of that. So, yeah, it doesn't surprise me, but it is a sad reality, isn't it?
Yeah, and all I would say is, if these people did this, then hold them to account. These people, individuals, must be held to account as much as the Indian state and the police are involved as well, because they are equally guilty in crimes against humanity. That's no exaggeration. Dal Singh says, we're doing a great job for Sikhs across the board, and you have signed the petition and have shared a link with the family. Yes, thank you for this reminder. If you are a UK citizen, please go sign that petition. The link is in the description below. This is the petition demanding all sorts of things. Go read the petition, but please do get it signed. We're up to, I think, just under 4,100 signatures. It's important you sign it, and we must get 100 signatures in each constituency so that we can, or the Sikh Federation can write to that specific MP who can then pressure the Prime Minister about Jagtar Singh Johal and, of course, about all the other issues highlighted in that. So, yes, please, if you're here in the UK, sign it. Just get online right now. Get online, sign it, get your friends to do it. It only takes a few signatures. Please, please, please do that now. Majid, who's one of our regular commenters, Majid always just drops a little hello or good morning. And again, it's just a timely hello back to you, Majid. Thank you for being in our audience. Thank you for your regular comments. Just a simple hello back to you, James.
Absolutely. And as we say in Canada, hello, eh?
There you go. And I think as we say in the north, all right. There you go. Right. Now, Balbir, of course, says, love you guys doing a great job letting the world know how many times Sikhs were betrayed. Well, I refer back to my first story where I prefaced that saying we must not forget. These betrayals must never be forgotten, whether it's 1947, whether it's the 1980s and 1990s, etc. The new generation, the youngsters, must be reminded and educated about what happened, because they must carry, unfortunately, this burden with them so that it cannot be repeated, right, so that they understand why it's so important. Don't get seduced by the Indian propaganda saying, oh, let's just move on and forget. Don't forget. You must not forget what happened. Firstly, because it mustn't be repeated. Secondly, because justice must still be done. And thirdly, because you can benefit from this. You can have your own sovereign homeland where you can live your life under your own culture, your own identity, and free, etc., James.
Exactly, and that's what it's all about, right?
And Vinnie Chorn comes in and says, look, Punjab doesn't just belong to Sikhs. That's absolutely right. There are minorities in Punjab now, as many converted to Christian. Yeah, there have been many, clearly, who have converted to Christianity. But the point of Khalistan is it is open, and as SSKK writes, all minorities are welcome. They're welcome in the Punjab now, but particularly in Khalistan, the whole foundations of Khalistan. Watch my podcast that's coming up tomorrow, Friday, with Dr. Graywell. We talk about the similarities between Sikhi and the US Constitution as opposed to the Indian Constitution. And those founding principles of the US Constitution reflect the founding principles of Sikhi, which are equality and freedom. That's what it's all about. That is what Khalistan is all about, James.
Absolutely. And that's something that we reiterate all the time, Angus.
Indeed we do. And the final comment from Achar Singh Gill says, people laugh at Khalistanis, calling them a lunatic fringe. We know they're not a fringe, as the referendum has pointed out. Since the time of Guru Sahib, Sikhs have always fought against the greatest odds. Absolutely they have. People making jokes and cursing always pass into oblivion. The Sikh nation rises in the end. Absolutely it will. And I would just point out the fact that even during the time of the Sikh Empire, they were a relatively small, it was a large empire, of course, relative to now. But in the grand scheme of the world at the time, it was a small nation. It came up against the might of the British Empire. Don't forget, the British Empire spanned a third of the globe. It was enormous. Most literally of the map, the world map, was British. But when they came up against the Sikh Empire and the Anglo-Sikh Wars, yes, ultimately they prevailed, the British prevailed, but they were so impressed with the might, the courage, the fighting prowess of the Sikhs that they invited the Sikhs to fight with them in the British Army. That is an honour only ever also bestowed on the Gurkhas, another people that are deeply honoured and deeply revered and respected by the British people. And likewise, the Sikhs proved their prowess back then, and that prowess is genetically ingrained in the Sikh people even today. And this is why, as you say, that we've always fought against the greatest odds. You're up against the Indian state at the moment, but it will prevail, James. This is why we're on this now. We know that we are backing the right horse in this race. We know that despite they may be small in number, they are certainly a very, very powerful community.
Absolutely, and you can look at the history of the World Wars and other times in which the Sikhs have stood shoulder to shoulder with the Royal British Army, the Canadian military, and so forth. I mean, they're always well respected and honoured because of the commitment and the skill that they bring forward.
Absolutely. And on that very powerful and positive note, we must draw Perspectives to a close for another day. But thank you for watching. Thank you for all your comments. Do keep them coming. Do let us know your thoughts, your opinions, your arguments, your corrections, whatever they may be, even your criticisms. Yes, we do enjoy your criticisms as well. But do keep them coming. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satlogetv.com if there's anything that you'd like to address to us directly. Please keep those emails coming as well. But in the meantime, that is Perspectives done for another day. Thank you so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me, and it is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.